Thanks for tuning in. This podcast is intended solely for the purpose of personal growth and not as a replacement for professional psychological support. The views and opinions of the hosts and guests of this show are not meant to be taken as medical advice. It is very important to seek the help of a qualified medical practitioner when making any shifts to psychiatric medication you may be taking, or if you are experiencing extreme psychological distress.
Welcome to The Drummer and the Great Mountain, a podcast where we share effective tips and practices for working with adults ADD, ADHD in a natural, effective way without the use of medications. Each episode, join me, your host, Batman Saram, along with the author of The Drummer and the Great Mountain, Michael Joseph Ferguson. Join Michael and myself in an interactive discussion of sharing our stories as we journey together in transforming what can be the gift of being what we call hunter types. This podcast is intended to be your audio companion to the book written by Michael, who joins me each episode where we both will strive to foster dialogue, give you our personal insights, and share both of our experiences on this similar path that we are all on. Our intention and hope is that along with the book, this podcast gives you an additional perspective as you listen to us delve deeper into each chapter of the book to give you even more tools to go along with what it is that you are reading. Visit us at drummerandthegreatmountain.com to purchase the book and look for more tools, tips, and updates, as well as giving us feedback on this podcast. Join our growing global community of creative types, entrepreneurs, and out-of-the-box thinkers on our shared journey. Welcome to The Drummer and the Great Mountain podcast.
Welcome, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. I'm your host, Michael Joseph Ferguson. How you doing? On today's podcast, we have author, chiropractor, and host of the Wellness Farmer podcast, Ben Page. This is a really great interview. We'll be discussing the benefits of chiropractic for hunter types and cover what Ben calls the 4 pillars of health. So stay tuned for that. I have one quick announcement. I'm happy to announce we will be offering another 2-month live online support group starting Tuesday, November 5th. Our current 2-month group has been amazing. It's been such an honor to work with all of you in the group. I know many of you are listening. You guys are incredible. It's just been a great honor to work with all of you. So many people from so many diverse backgrounds all over the world. It's just been awesome. So I really felt like going into the holidays, we thought it would be beneficial to hold another 2-month session to continue to do what we've been doing, but also to give like an anchor to tackle the stress and overwhelm that often happens around the holidays, especially for us hunter types. So we'll be meeting every Tuesday at 3 p.m. So these are live sessions from November 5th through the end of December. So they'll be all Tuesdays, except the last session will be on Monday, December 30th. So it does not land on New Year's Eve. So in the group, we'll utilize the same tools that I've been using for many, many years doing my one-on-one coaching sessions. So that's getting support on clarifying your goals, optimizing your task and time management systems, and building good habits. That is the big one, building good habits. The intention for the group is you get into the group and you get into the habit of doing the regular weekly check-in, and it supports you in building good habits, because those are the things, if you have good habits in place, then your life will inevitably move in a good direction. It's getting those habits in place. That's what I focus on when I'm talking to you one-on-one. When you ask questions, I'm always looking at what habits can I support you with to build into your life in a way that feels comfortable for you, that doesn't feel like you're forcing it, or it's like working with your natural tendencies, getting the support from the people around you. What other kind of systems can we put in place to really get those going so that after the group is over, you're good. You can keep cruising on those habits that you've built during those sessions. And I think the most useful part of the group is the opportunity for you to connect with fellow hunter types. There's a real sense of community that builds around these groups. And I'm just so pleased to see that. And I really enjoy people encouraging each other, offering support. A lot of people offer resources that I've not heard of. And I'm like, oh, that's an excellent resource. I'm always learning new things from you all as we're going through the group. So I hope you can join us. These are live audio video sessions. We use Zoom conferencing. It's really stable and easy to use. They have a free web app or a phone app, or you can dial in via the phone line. Each live session is 90 minutes, and then I stay after for Q&A. So I will be on, and basically we'll just answer questions. If you want to do something like one-on-one, asking me questions, that time is always available at the end of each session. All sessions are recorded, and you'll have access to those indefinitely. So if you're interested, visit drummerinthegreatmountain.com/group, drummerinthegreatmountain.com/group. Hope you can join us. And on to my interview with Ben Page. Okay, on today's podcast, we have Ben Page. Ben Page is an author. He's a chiropractor. He's also the host of the Wellness Farmer podcast. He's living in Rosario, Argentina, and today we'll be discussing your overall well-being. This is one of the key areas that Ben has really synthesized, what he calls the 4 pillars of health. So we'll be talking about that, how it relates to being a hunter type. We'll be discussing chiropractic and how that enhances your nervous system. That's something that I have as part of my monthly routine, bi-weekly, I'd say. And then we're going to lead into then why growing your own food can be deeply beneficial to your overall health. So Ben, welcome. Thanks for joining us on the podcast.
No, my pleasure. I'm so glad I can actually be on your podcast. Last time I talked to you, you were on my podcast.
That's right.
So
yeah.
It's great to be on your podcast.
I believe I was the first podcast I was ever on, besides my own. So yeah, it was great. I think it was cool. 2016 we were on.
It was a while ago. Yep.
Yeah, and I think you were still living in the States then, right?
Yep. I was living in southern Utah, and it must have been southern Utah.
Well, let's talk about that a little. Let's get a little backstory on you. So why don't you share a little bit about what got you into placing as health and well-being as like your primary focus with your work, and also what has led you down to Argentina and what you're doing now?
Cool. Since I was young, I've always wanted to work in the health profession. For many, many years, I always thought that I was going to be a medical doctor, and I was going to take that route. And the reason I wanted to be a medical doctor is because I wanted to do what I saw a lot of other people doing, going to third world, or I guess not third, underdeveloped countries, and working with people that just don't have any way of getting any type of medical treatment. And that's I love going out there in the middle of nowhere and just being out there, being away from everything. And I thought, well, if I'm a medical doctor, I could go out there and I can help people while actually doing something that I really love to do.
Yeah.
That was when I was young. That was before the thought of marriage came up or anything like that. As I got older, I met a wonderful woman. We ended up getting married, and that kind of changes your plans because
yes.
You're not going to take your wife out in the middle of nowhere for months or years at a time. So I started to study philosophy through medicine, and my brother-in-law was a chiropractor at the time. He's like, why don't you check out the chiropractic philosophy? So I actually started learning and studying both philosophies of medical philosophy and chiropractic philosophy. And it was funny. I was reading about chiropractic philosophy, and it's how I was basically raised. It just made sense to me. It's just like, wow, that's how I was raised. So why in the world would I go this direction if that's how I've lived, and that's how I believe health is truly found. So that's why I decided to become a chiropractor, and I eventually went to Palmer in Iowa, in Davenport, Iowa, and I graduated in 2010 as a chiropractor. And since then, I've been working as a chiropractor, among other things. I mean, if we want, we can even go further into this whole story, but that's the main reason why I chose the path of chiropractic. I've always wanted to work in the medical field, but the chiropractic philosophy, the way they treat and the way the body heals itself, it was more attractive to me, and that's why I became a chiropractor.
Interesting. Well, and let's lead into this. So let's go into like that led into you writing a book called The 4 Pillars of Health. And I'd love to go get into that a little bit, because it seems like your journey has led you there and continues to move into like the importance of nutrient dense food and just how all that relates to your overall health and well-being. Do you want to talk a little bit about the book and just some of the principles that you've developed over time? I know it's based on a lot of the people that you've worked with and observing what's worked and what hasn't worked. So why don't you share a little bit about that?
Yeah, the 4 Pillars of Health. So when I was in chiropractic college, it's basically you're going through medical school, but with chiropractic technique. And instead of learning all the different types of medications you can prescribe for different types of illness, we learn more about the philosophy of the body can heal itself with these certain techniques. But you go through all the anatomy, the physiology, pathology, do X-ray, do everything. You go through all that. So during that time, it was mainly just learning the basics of anatomy, physiology, all of that stuff. Yes. After school was when I really dove into what is wellness, and that was on my own time. On my own time, I started really, any free time I had, I was either reading books on health and wellness or on permaculture, and these are 2 subjects that I became quite passionate about over the years, and that's how it all came together. When I started learning that health is more than just chiropractic. It's a lot more than just chiropractic. Chiropractic is part of one of the pillars of what true health is. If you want to feel healthy, which most people haven't felt. Yeah. I'm not saying there's a lot of people out there that feel great, but they can actually feel even better if they just involved in their daily lifestyles, these things I'm talking about. Of course, it's not something easy, but nothing easy is really worth it. If you want to get something out of it, usually things are difficult or tough. Easy stuff usually doesn't give us much to go on. So it's not easy, but they're simple. It's simple to understand, but to implement it into your daily lifestyle, because that's what it is. They need to become lifestyles. If you implement them as lifestyles, what one can actually feel is incredible, internally and externally. It's not just the external, but internally it's incredible. So I started to study about who we are, how we talk to ourselves, the type of nutrition or what we should be eating, and also the importance of movement and the opposite of movement, rest. So in the book, I talk about movement, but there's part of that chapter is about rest too, and the importance of resting also. You just can't move; you have to rest at the same time. They work together. Yeah. If you're not resting, the movement's not going to do much. If you're not moving, you're not going to be resting much either. And then the opposite of stress too, because in the chapter of chiropractic, I do talk a lot about the stress response, because one of the things chiropractic also does is help decrease the amount of physical stress in joints, so the physical stress. Yes. So talking about stress, you also have to talk about the opposite, about eustress, which is actually good stress, the stress that we need to reach our health potentials.
What is that term again? I didn't catch that.
Eustress. So it just means good stress.
Okay, got it.
And we also need that in our lives to reach our health potential. So we're taught that we should be trying to get rid of and stay away from stress as much as possible. That's chronic stress we want to. We want to stay as far away as possible as chronic stress. But short acute moments of stress are actually very important for us. So that's another part of the book. That's another part of the 4 pillars of health, but that's under the chapter of where I talk about spinal health, and which has to do with chiropractic care.
Excellent. And so can you talk a little bit about, let's go through the 4. Do you want to go through the 4 pillars, and just talk about one each individually, and just give a little bit of just a little information to give people a context for how to view their own physical health, and then also maybe some actions that they could potentially take. I know this audience, just knowing my audience well, I think the need for rest is a huge one. We've got a group going right now, and I know one of the things we talk about is how even if you're trying to integrate new systems into your life and your stress levels are really high and you're not resting enough, then you're always fighting against yourself. You're never really going to integrate things in. Whereas when you get that deep rest, that deep sleep, and you take care of yourself, then your mental functions are better, and you're able to deal with life. And I believe, as probably you'd share, is through chiropractic and yoga and stretching and movement, we can release that stress, the physical stress, the stress that's caught in our bodies. We can release some of that so that we're not just walking around tense and contracted, in how that affects our overall well-being. So would you like to go into it a little bit and share a little, maybe one piece from each of the 4 pillars, and then maybe one action item someone could take to move one step closer to that, to a sense of overall well-being?
Oh, we can start with movement, since you were just talking about rest a little bit and how movement kind of goes with rest. Movement is something that most people have a hard time doing. First of all, because most people just don't like to do it. So it's a lot about changing our systems, our belief systems. We actually have to change our belief system about what exercise actually is, and that's actually good for us instead of something that is painful and tiring and all that stuff that we feel. It's invigorating. It makes me feel better. It builds me, and all that other stuff. We should be thinking that instead of what most people think exercise is. And exercise needs to be rigorous, especially in today's world, because we're sitting down so many hours during the day. We should be rigorously exercising for between 30 minutes to an hour a day, at least 3 to 5 times a week. We should try to be doing it actually 5 times a week. Of course, if you have a job where you're outside and you're working, that's something different. But if you're sitting behind a desk, you should be thinking first about understanding what exercise truly is, and is that in what it truly is part of a healthy lifestyle, and it's good for you, and it's going to build you up and make you stronger, not tiring and all those other negative connotations we give to it. Yes. It's really good for you. We should be looking to do it about 5 times a week. If you're sitting down, 30 to an hour of rigorous exercise. So that's getting to the point where you're breathing pretty hard. Yeah. And that's what we should be doing. And of course, that's going to make it a lot easier to rest at night, to be able to wake up the next day to do the exact same thing. So movement, very, very important. Sedentary lifestyles, the new smoking. Stay away from it at all costs. Get up and move. I recommend not sitting down for more than 45 minutes at a time. Get up, do something. Get up, do 10 push-ups. If you can't do 10 push-ups, get up and try to do 1. But get up and do something.
And this is really good. This is something that I talk about constantly on this podcast is, and I think you're setting a higher bar than even I set, which is especially people who are hunter types. They've got a lot of energy. It's like you just said, 45 minutes down, sitting down, then you're up and you're moving around, even if it's just for a little bit, stretching, doing whatever you can to keep movement going. As for your overall well-being, the stress reduction of it, the mental clarity, which is one of the pieces I really push, and then just being able to give our bodies are made to move, like you said. So if we have really good movement and enjoyable movement where it feels good and where we feel in our bodies, we feel like we are embodied as we move through the world instead of just in our head, which is, I'd say, 90% of the planet or 90% of Western culture. I'll put it that way. Other cultures are far more, I think, embodied than we are in the Western world. So yes, 100% agree with that. Please continue.
And another thing about movement too is that, like you were saying, we need to feel it. And the thing about movement is it's so easy to feel. It's so easy to be in the moment when we are moving. We forget about everything else. And that's another great way for the whole reduction in stress. I mean, it brings us to the now. It brings us, and we focus on what we're doing at this moment. Yes. Today, most people have such a hard time focusing. That's why this whole huge boom of meditation is because everyone has such a hard time focusing now, because they're either worrying about the past or anxious about the future.
Yes.
So that movement will bring us back to now, and it's a great way to reduce overall stress. It reduces endorphins, so you get that feeling of euphoria, that feeling of just well-being. Most people will feel it, not everyone at the beginning, because most people just feel tired afterwards, but if you continue, you'll start to feel it, and it's a wonderful feeling. Movement has so much good about it, and it's super important for overall health, for overall well-being too. So movement's one when combined with rest. The second one is what I call natural internal dialogue, because we are born in a way that we're happy. You look at babies and they cry for very few reasons. They cry because they're either hungry, they're lonely, or they need their diaper changed. Other than that, they're pretty much happy.
Yeah.
I mean, so we pretty much come into this world happy, and what happens. Life happens, and it knocks us down once, and we get up, and it knocks us down again, and we get up, and knocks us down a third time, and we're like, oh man, should I get up or should I just stay down? Yeah. And it knocks us down. So I call it natural internal dialogue, because we're naturally, this is who we are naturally, but we through life and through all this tough times that we go through, which truly are to make us better if we look at it that way. Our challenges are to make us better if we let them, but they are tough times, and sometimes they get us down. So I call it natural internal dialogue because it's who we are naturally. We don't have to go far away. Just look inside who you are, and it can take some deep thought to get to see who you truly are, because you've been on that path of looking at yourself in a negative way for so long. But you'll find it. It's there because it's who you truly are. So learning how to talk to ourselves in a natural manner, being the person who we naturally are. So looking at who we truly are, our potential, which is beyond what we even comprehend. There's people that have written that we don't even reach 40% of what our potential is, and we could reach so much more if we would just dig deep and truly work at it. So just talking to ourselves in a natural manner is probably one of the most, nowadays is probably one of the most important aspects of health, because social media makes it almost impossible to think that we're doing good.
Yes, absolutely. Because
we look at all these people. Yeah, and we just compare ourselves when we should only be comparing ourselves to ourselves yesterday. Am I better than yesterday? Am I making progress from yesterday? If I'm progressing from yesterday, that means I'm on the right path, instead of always comparing us to the person that's got this and that and this and that. No. Am I better than I was yesterday? Yes. And that's a great way to talk to ourselves. Who am I? Who was I yesterday? Who am I today? Am I better today? Did I do one thing better today? Did I wake up and say, I'm grateful for this, that, and that? Did I take those 20 minutes and just sit down and relax and be grateful and focus on my breath and just be grateful to be here today? And if we can get back to that and realize who we truly are as human beings, life becomes not only a lot easier, but a lot more healthy.
That's fantastic. Yes, I completely agree. And this is, again, a lot of what we've been talking about in the group the last couple of weeks has been, what do you do in the morning to like get your head going in a good direction? And gratitude practice is awesome. Like even just what are 3 gratitudes? What are three things you're grateful for today? So you're in that space of I already have it versus I want. And I'm guessing like meditation's a big part of this too. I mean, there's a piece, what I've experienced when I've spent many years studying meditation since 1995, 94. And, what I've noticed, and I'm guessing what you maybe have noticed as well, is when you get to a place of deep meditation where your mind completely stops, you get all the chatter goes away, all of the visuals, the thoughts that become visual, which is usually like one of the other ways that we are like in our mind, when those quiet down and there's just that quiet peace. And sometimes people experience this when they're like looking at a beautiful scene or they're out in nature where like all the chatter stops. And sometimes it's only for a second. But I feel like it's in that moment you get a glimpse of kind of your bigger self, and you start to see that, oh, there's this little teeny container that is talking at me, and you're seeing, something in the past or something in the future. It's like how the brain mechanism at work protecting you from whatever is going to come next, which seems to be what the brain does. The big part of the brain is what's going to happen in the future that could potentially kill me, and how do I prevent that from happening? And so that's usually the obsessive thought is, well, this happened, and then how is this going to affect me in the future? So it's back and forth between the past and the future. And when that quiets down, you get a sense that there's this bigger something behind that. And I'm guessing that's what you're talking about.
Oh yeah, and who we truly are. Yeah. Yeah, the brain's there to keep us alive, and as long as we're stressed, that's all it's going to do is keep us alive. But if we can find that moment, and we can just leave and get to that moment that you're talking about, oh yeah, it's beautiful, and learn who we truly are as human beings. Our potential is so much more than we actually believe it is.
I love it. And I'm guessing a lot of that's like reducing the self-judgment. That's a lot what we talk about in this podcast. How do you reframe the things that we judge ourselves for and accept ourselves for exactly who we are, which is, we're capable of seeing a perfect picture of what our life should be like. And it's not realistic for anyone, but for people who listen to this podcast, I think it's strong. We have a stronger inner critic. And so we have to, on a daily basis, keep it in check.
Oh yeah. And that's the only way we can truly progress too, is realizing who we are. I mean, this is who I am. So this is who I am. And this is, then that's the first point of, then this is where, how are we supposed to know where we're going to go? So yeah, that's very important to realize who we truly are. And to tell you the truth, I mean, we need to realize that we have both aspects. I mean, we are human beings with the capacity to love that's beyond that we can comprehend, and we also have to comprehend that we have the exact opposite, and we have that other side. And then once we understand that we have both sides, then we can that's when we can truly say, well, now I have the control, because I know what I am capable of. I am capable of this, but I'm also capable of the opposite, and I'm in control of what's going to happen. So the third pillar is actually spinal care. So it has a lot to do with posture. So just us against gravity, and then that includes chiropractic. I mean, one of the major physical stressors in life is actually just gravity when we're not when we're not using proper posture, and that just kills it doesn't kill, but it puts a lot of stress on our joints. So going back to what stress is, and if we look at stress, it doesn't matter if it's physical stress or emotional stress or economical stress or noise stress or light stress, any type, or toxic stress. Stress does the exact same thing on the body. It starts the stress response. So it fight or flight, the sympathetic nervous system. Yes. And it doesn't matter what type, it's the same type of stress. So if it's a physical stress, it's going to cause the exact same thing. And that constant stress on our joints due to bad posture will cause another type of stress, which will eventually cause some type of illness, some type of symptom. Usually people complain of pain headaches, numbness and tingling. Those are usually the symptoms they'll experience first. But this comes down to your spinal health. And the reason why spinal health is so important, and this is going back to the father of medicine, who said, when there's sickness, first look to the spine.
Yeah.
Because that's where the central nervous system is. That's what controls absolutely everything. So it's not just the pain in the joints or the pain running down the arm or the numbness and tingling running down the arm. It's the function of everything that we don't even know is functioning. So all of our organs and everything else.
Yes,
so
all those things working behind the scenes that we're not thinking about how our spleen's working on a daily basis, but it is definitely, you would know it if it's not.
Yeah. So all of that is controlled by our central nervous system, and through chiropractic and proper posture and movement, we can maintain those joints in a way that we're not going to have to worry about those symptoms over time. So chiropractic is more of a preventative measure. It's not, most people do go to chiropractors because they're in so much pain they can't take it anymore, so they're trying to release pain. But chiropractic is actually a preventative branch of medicine where it's a great way to never have to suffer those things if you decide to. And what it is what we're basically doing is we're bringing back the talk between the central nervous system to the peripheral nervous system, or our extremities, and not just the extremities, but all of the organs and our environment around us. So we bring that communication back, and it's actually the communication is more important from outside in. So the efferent communication, so everything from our environment that goes inside, is actually more important from what the central nervous system sends out, because there's a lot more information that's getting sent in than getting sent out. And if we have that communication between the central nervous system and our environment, if it gets there, our central nervous system will know what to do and how to do it and when to do it. And the cool thing about chiropractic is my job is basically just facilitate the recuperation. I don't do really anything to help the patient recuperate. The recuperation happens inside the patient. I just return that communication between the central nervous system and our environment to the central nervous system, and then the body does the rest. It's beautiful. It's beautiful. Of course, we also teach how proper postures, so we can maintain those postures, and we can maintain the proper alignment of our spines for as long as possible. However, we do understand that life is stressful. Just getting up and knowing that you're going to have to go to work, knowing that you're going to have to drive a car 20 minutes to work, that's a stressful event. Maybe you don't think you're stressful, but your body subconsciously is stressed, knowing that you're going 45 miles or 55 or 65 miles an hour when you shouldn't be going that fast. Right. So just life alone is stressful, but we try to prevent those things by being proactive, and chiropractic is a great way to be proactive in what is the caring of your spine. So the other pillar would be spinal care. Take care of your spine. We only have one, and there's no such thing as a spine transplant. I don't know who said. It's not mine. Someone said that. That's not me saying. But so take care of the one you have. And one of the best ways to do that is to try to always have proper posture, exercise, and see a chiropractor regularly. My recommendation, I go personally once every 3 weeks. Some people don't have to. I have a job as a chiropractor that's kind of stressful in the joints. So I do a lot of repetitive motion in against weight, and that's one of the things that kind of wears us out. So I go a little bit more often than maybe someone that doesn't do what I do. But I go about once every 3 weeks, and I recommend it so we can take care of our spine. So spinal care is another one of the pillars.
Well, this is great. And so I definitely can have experience on this. So I'm probably at twice a month going to chiropractic. And what I found, and if there's many studies on ADHD and chiropractic and how beneficial chiropractic adjustment can be. And I think you highlight a lot of the key pieces, which is reducing the stress on the body when parts of the spine are out of alignment. I can say from my personal experience, I can think clear after an adjustment. My posture's better. I feel better. And there's also ample evidence to show that chiropractic also enhances your immune system. And it just overall, it's one of those things where, I think it's important to note this, that there are different, there's people in chiropractic, there's many different types of chiropractors, and some of them are really good and some of them may not be a fit for you. So if you've had an adjustment in the past where you've had a chronic situation where you wanted to have an adjustment and it didn't work out, I would explore multiple chiropractors. If you haven't found one that fits for you, I can definitely attest, because I've been going to chiropractic off and on since I was a kid. And a good chiropractor can be life-changing. You can really find the difference. And it's also, as you mentioned, not just going because you have some major chronic pain going on that's keeping you from functioning. Chiropractic is, as I view and as you stated, it's restorative. You can go through and get adjusted even if you're feeling okay, and you'll be, especially if you haven't had a chiropractic adjustment ever or in a long time. If it's done well, you'll think clear. You'll notice a difference in your overall well-being because, and I believe a lot of it's because the internal stressors on the spine have been reduced. I mean, maybe you can talk a little bit more about that. Like, I guess the big question, and I know this is what the audience is asking, how can chiropractic support greater mental clarity, more energy? What potentially can happen in an adjustment that could support someone has challenges with focus, motivation, and low energy levels?
Oh, perfect. Well, first, I mean, I'll answer it in a second, but you're completely right with finding the right chiropractor. I mean, chiropractic is an art. It's not something that you just go to school and learn and then you just do it. It's an art. So it's something you have to become good at, and it takes practice. And through my personal experience also, it's a lot of chiropractors just don't learn the art. I mean, I'm not trying to bring anyone down or anything like that. It's just what I've also experienced through my life too. So yeah, you want to find a chiropractor that really understands the art and is truly focused on finding that lesion and knows how to find it and knows how to treat that specific lesion, which is called a subluxation, is what we treat. But going back to your other question, it's very interesting in how chiropractic works, because it was all theory for a long time. And I mean, the founder of chiropractic, he wrote quite a bit of books about his theory and why chiropractic works and how it works through the central nervous system. But nowadays, it's kind of been through science, not through chiropractic science, but through studies done in medicine. It's kind of been taken to the point where, wow, it actually does do what the founder actually thought it did. And what we found is that we have two different receptors. We have many receptors, but these two I'm going to talk about. They're called mechanoreceptors or proprioceptors, so our own receptors, so proprio and receptors. And then we have nociceptors, so pain receptors. So these proprioceptors, it's what helps us feel where we're at in the environment. It lets us know where we are in the environment. And the majority of these proprioceptors are found in the muscle tissue in the upper cervical spine and in the lower back.
Okay.
And what they found with these proprioceptors is that those proprioceptors, if those aren't functioning, or if there's too much pain reception, so too much nociception, what happens is that information doesn't get sent to the cerebellum. And then cerebellum, what does the cerebellum do? The cerebellum is what causes all the fine movement. So we don't have all this shaky movement because we have the cerebellum that's working properly. But they found that it's not only movement, but it's thought, it's feelings, it's everything. So the cerebellum controls everything. It finalizes everything that we do. So if that proprioception doesn't get to the cerebellum, that information get to the cerebrum, and then we are not going to be able to focus.
Yeah.
So if we have the proper amount of proprioception getting to the cerebellum, and then the cerebellum to the brain, that's how it not only makes us feel better, but we're able to focus better, and we're able to do all those other things because we can find ourselves in our environment. How many people try to walk through a door and they kind of hit their shoulder against the door? They're like, what? And they just think they're walking normally.
Yes.
It's because the difference between proprioception and nociception is just out of whack. So what the adjustment does, what the chiropractic treatment does, it will increase the amount of proprioception, increase the amount of mechanoreception. And that's one of the ways it helps decrease pain too. So if you increase mechanoreception and proprioception, that's going to decrease nociception. So it's going to help decrease overall pain. And you don't have to be feeling pain. There can be lots of nociception because it's just noxious stimuli. So stress itself will cause nociception, an increase in nociception. So it'll decrease that and increase the amount of proprioception. So all that information gets to the cerebellum, and we can be a lot more sharper in our thoughts, in our movements, and everything else that we do in life. It's incredible what's come out between those two things, the cerebellum, how the cerebellum functions with proprioception and nociception, and how that helps the rest of the brain function also. So everything goes through the cerebellum first. It's one of the smaller parts of the brain, but is about as many neurons as the brain itself.
That is fantastic. That's a really good, these are pieces that I know, like just from sitting in the chiropractor's office and seeing charts and things on the, showing the what's the term? The sympathetic nervous system, showing the different nerve endings, and that makes total sense. So that's fascinating. And I think the takeaway from this, I want to come back to the audience, which is that if you haven't gotten a chiropractic adjustment lately, try. Like, to me, with everything we talk about on this podcast, it's don't take my word for it. Go and try it and see what you experience, because your body will tell you. Especially, and sometimes chiropractic, if you haven't gone in a while, it may take 1 or 2 or 3 adjustments before you to feel. In fact, usually, sometimes the first adjustment, I sometimes will feel a little off if it's been a while, and then if I do a second one, maybe in 2 weeks after that, then you really feel a difference. Can you make a note on that? Like, what is if someone hasn't gotten an adjustment in a while, 1, what can they expect in the first adjustment? And 2, how many sessions do you think would be, and also given people's budgets, I mean, it can be expensive if it's not covered, which if you might want to check your insurance, because many insurance now do cover chiropractic. What to expect from the first session, and then how many sessions do you recommend, and how often to get them? So you would have a sense of, oh yeah, this actually did work.
Yeah, that'll change for and that depends on the situation. That depends on where the patient is too. I mean, if they're going to a chiropractor symptom-free, they should feel change first and second treatment. Okay. If you're going in there with symptomatology, so you're going in there with pain or something like that, you can even leave the chiropractor the first visit, and you can actually be a little more. It'll actually feel a little bit more pain in the area, because we need to realize that joint is irritated. I mean, that's an irritated joint. So by putting that proper motion, or that, because it either loses motion or it's got an aberrant motion, an motion that's not proper, I mean, that's going to stress it just a little bit more, so it connect, but it's at the same time it's going to recuperate. So some people, I think a small percentage, I think they said about 30% will actually feel a little bit more discomfort after the first visit. But if you're going symptom-free, you should feel pretty good after the first or second visit. And again, like I say, I go every 3 weeks, but it all depends on the person and their lifestyle. I mean, if you're sedentary, I definitely recommend it once every 3 weeks. If you're active, maybe once every month, every 6 weeks. But you should feel a difference. I mean, most people, if you've never experienced chiropractic, if you got a good chiropractic adjustment, I mean, you're feeling different. Like seconds afterwards, you're feeling different. If you've never had one, or if it's been a long time since you've had one. Yeah,
I have to agree. It's something that is just part of it just budget for it, and we just make it happen, because especially if if I can feel, for me, it's my neck, because I sit and I do coaching calls all day. So I'm taking lots of notes, and even so, yoga and stretching is a big part of it, of, opening myself up, but nothing really can do what chiropractic can do from my experience. I could do yoga all day long. It's not going to be the same as one. And we're talking, I mean, I'd say 15 minutes tops when I get adjustments, they're short. It's not like a long, arduous process. What's a typical session for you? How long is it for an adjustment?
Well, I like to talk, so
got it. That's good. You get to give other pointers.
Yeah, we get into, and sometimes it's just about life itself. But I usually give about 30 minutes to each patient, which is, I mean, so I usually try to. But it can be quicker than that. But I usually work, if it's a new patient, it's usually about an hour, but because we have to talk about their history. But a patient that comes in just for a chiropractic adjustment, about 30 minutes.
That's fantastic. That's good. You put a lot of care into your patients. Well, let's see. So did we cover all four, or do we have one more on the pillars?
So last one is nutrient-dense food. So yes. not just nutrient-dense food, but nutrient-dense food grown in fertile soil without chemicals. So we need to make sure, because today it's become very difficult to find nutritious food. The industrial food production system is causing havoc. I mean, the whole green revolution supposedly saved billions of lives, but they didn't think about the consequences, and we're starting to see those consequences today with an incredible amount of sickness. Of course, it's not just the food. I mean, it's the way we live our lives, but a lot of it has to do with nutrition. So we have to give our bodies what it requires and what it really deserves. I mean, what it needs to function at its best. So the last point would be nutrient-dense food grown in fertile soil without chemicals.
Yes.
And to me, that's probably one of my number one topics. I've been growing gardens since I was a kid. I kind of went away from it as I was living in Las Vegas and going to chiropractic college. But chiropractic college is what actually brought me back to it. And since then, it's just been learn as much as I can and fail as many times as I can.
Yes.
learning while I fail. Yeah. First of all, if you can grow it, grow it. I mean, of course, a lot of us can't, but the best place to get nutrient-dense food is your own. So you know exactly what you're doing, what you're putting into it, and so that's the best place. Then the second place is get to know your farmer. So get to know the guy closest to you that's doing what you can't do because you're either space or time, and do business with him because he's doing it right. So give him a reason to continue to do business because he's doing it right, and we need more of him out there. We need a lot more farmers. I think in the United States nowadays, I think like 2% of the population is growing all the food. I mean, there's very few farmers left, and a lot of because like you were saying, monocrop farming is just there's not a lot of money in it either. It's almost just pure debt. And now what they have to do with all the spraying in the soil is definitely dead. So if you want nutrient-dense food, the soil has to be alive. If you don't have microorganisms in the soil, they can't work with the roots, and the roots can't take the nutrients out of the soil. So yes. Even if you do have a fruit or a vegetable, what you're eating is a nutrient poor fruit or vegetable. It's not giving what your body deserves or requires, and that's what's happened. Yes, since a little bit before World War II. I mean, if you look at Joel Salatin, he yes. has a pretty neat quote about when the supermarkets came around, and it was somewhere in the 40s. I think it was the first supermarket. He's like, so where do we get our food? Well, we got in our backyards, our pantries, and the local farmers. That's how we got our food. And we're just talking about the 40s. So we're talking my grandparents. I mean, it's not that long ago that we did it quite differently, but most people just don't realize that. So what I usually say is try growing some of your own food, but it all starts with compost. It all starts with that cycle of life. So what you need to do is first try to make some compost that you can actually put back into your soil and actually bring to life your soil again. So the more compost we have, the more organic matter we have in our soil, the faster it's going to come back to life. So I always say start with compost. There's many ways to do it, and the way I do it, I mean, if you want to see the way I do it, I actually made a video about it. You can go to my YouTube series. I'm on Pasto Verdes Farm, and for episode number 1, because that's why it's so important. Episode number 1 is how I compost. And what I'm doing here in Argentina is I have very, very little space. So what do I have? I have just a little, I'm talking maybe 9 feet by 9 feet between the street between the street and the sidewalk. So it's not even mine. It's the piece of land that's in between the street and the sidewalk. So everyone walks by it. I mean, I've had some great conversations with people walking by and like, what in the heck are you doing out here? Planting a garden in the front yard. And I've been able to get to know a lot more my neighbors. So that's another great thing about gardening. It's community building. I've got to know a lot of people I would have never gotten to know if I wasn't out there working. Unfortunately, people take my food without asking, but that's part of the deal. If you're planting a garden in your front yard, and in my backyard, I have absolutely nothing. I have planter boxes, so I have 5 planter boxes, and that's, I mean, again, if you watch that video series that I'm doing, which is I'm basically walking you through my experience with urban gardening, you'll see that through these planter boxes, I got tons of tomatoes, tons of jalapeno peppers. At the same time, I got a spider mite plague, and they took all my tomatoes. So it wasn't all uphill, and it's tough. And you have to, and that's the neat thing about gardening, because it realized that, well, the cycle of life, well, this comes and that goes, and this comes and that goes, and when there's no need to get down about it, because the next thing's going to come. It's just the cycle of life. Yes. But start with compost. Bring your soil back to life. If you're lucky enough to have a land with a lot of soil, oh my goodness, please turn it to a garden, because that's where you're going to get your food. And talking about the garden, I mean, if you don't mind, I mean, I have a new book coming out called Playing in the Dirt.
Love it.
Because to me, gardening is just playing in the dirt. I mean, as an adult, I can play in the dirt, and gardening is just so much more than nutrient-dense food. It's the dirt is basically who we are. So we need to be touching the dirt. So that's another great way. That's another great reason to plant your own food, because you're going to be touching that soil that's alive. We need to be touching that. But that's my experience. My experience is very little space. So I grow, I don't know what, 1-2% of what I grow. So what do? I go to the in Argentina here, they're called ferias, and they have their little one every Friday here. I go over and I buy from the local farmers that I know they're not using chemicals. So I get a lot of my vegetables from these local farmers, because I don't have the space to do it. And I go and I give them business. And then I try to grow what I can. But nutrient-dense food, like you were saying at the beginning, it's become a lot more difficult due to the fact that we have basically dead soil. Yeah. And with dead soil, there's no nutrition in our food. And that's come to pass supposedly for a good reason, but we didn't understand the consequences of what's happening now, and the constant usage of spraying chemicals, and It just becomes, and then there's just more and more chemicals, because what happens, you spray a chemical to kill the bugs. Well, the strongest bugs survive, they mate, and now what happens? Well, now you need even a stronger chemical, because the strongest bugs survived and they mated. So and it gets worse and worse and worse. The same thing with the weeds. The strongest weeds survive, they reproduce. The amount used wasn't enough, so now they have to double the amount of herbicide just to kill the same weed that they killed with a lot less the 2 years before. Yes. So it's a process that we cannot win. And what we need to understand as humans is we never will ultimately win against nature. We might win a couple battles, but the war will be won.
Nature is far more powerful, as we're seeing right now on the planet. And it's a lose-lose situation for the farmers, because at the end of the day, they are spending more and more and more money. They get the hit in the beginning. It's like a drug. You get the hit and you feel good, and then slowly over time, it has depleted our soils, and they're spending more and more money on pest management and all these other places. Whereas, and there's been studies on this where they've tracked organic farmers, and in the short term, organic farmers, it costs a little bit more. They're not making as much as return, but they have much more sustainability. They're able to grow much more. Their soil continues to get better and better and better, depending on how they manage their soil. I want to mention a couple points here. I feel like this is really important for this audience to hear this. So we talk about the hunter-farmer theory, and often we talk about, well, we're not farmers. But I want to make a key note here that for hunter types, gardening is absolutely so beneficial to us, and we are absolutely capable of doing as hunter types. If not, I know some really good gardeners that are hunter types. So I want to give a couple notes. If you're a hunter type and you want to start a garden in your backyard, one is get yourself inspired. Get on YouTube, look at some things that you love to grow. That's one. Two. So then there's like for me right now, I've got in our garden we have bell peppers. We have basil, tomatoes, cucumbers. Let's see. I've got a couple trees growing in pots. I've got a moringa tree, which we were talking about off the top. With moringa, look it up. It's called the miracle tree. You're basically getting so many nutrients from those leaves that it's like a little smoothie in a tree. You can just continually harvest from it. Star fruit, cherimoyas, and these rare fruits. One suggestion I would have is look at things that are expensive in the market and grow that. So like we're growing lots of bell peppers because those tend to be expensive here. So if you can grow it, also it's a cool project. You can set, instead of worrying about, because the consistency piece is hard for hunter types. So plan into your garden, if you either have a space that you can garden in the soil or you can garden in pots, set up a drip system. Cheap, doesn't cost that much, maybe $30-$40. You're into a drip system and you just set the timer and you're good to go. Look at square foot gardening. That's a really good entry level into this work. It's simplified, really good system of gardening to check out. Really well mapped out. Mel, what are you familiar with?
Mel Bartholomew.
Yeah, that's it. So that's a good intro. Permaculture is a little more involved, so just starting there is a really good starting point. And then I would look at, in terms of mineralization, I'm going to give a shout out to one of my old friends. So Agrowin fertilizers, if you look them up online, fertilizeronline.com. George Spory is someone that I've known for a long time. He makes sells rock dust, which is rock flowers that's remineralizing your soil, just gives your soil an extra boost of minerals. You can add that and worm castings to your soil, and you're going to get a super healthy soil with lots of micronutrients. You're increasing the soil life. Highly recommended if you're gardening. It's just a really simple add to just about anything that you're growing. Gardening is not as, if you haven't done it or haven't done it since you were a little kid, it is not as complex as probably you're telling yourself in this moment. To be like, there's this whole thing, well, I don't have a green thumb. Look, just do like 5 minutes of research, get on YouTube, look at some videos. It's not that difficult. We planted an entire garden in June, and by end of July, we had tons of stuff coming up. Make sure you just have, look at where you live and what's possible to grow there, start there. But I can't stress it enough. Hunter types and gardening definitely go hand in hand, and I highly recommend the audience to check it out.
That's awesome that you got so much produce from your garden. Oh man.
It's exciting, and it's all in pots. We just have pots. I would love to have a giant backyard, but we've got enough room for potted plants, and I'm growing some trees, and and it also just, as you can attest, it's good for your well-being. It gives you a sense that you can quiet the monkey mind down, get your hands in the soil, even if it's just potting soil, and then also just watching it every day changing and growing, and if you have kids, getting them involved. And it's saving you money in the long run. If you keep doing this, it's just part of your routine, especially if you got a drip system. It's just a win-win across the board.
Oh yeah. And all that you said, yep. There's really, the only thing that takes away from it is it does take some time. It does take some time, but that time is, you win so much from it. Like you were just saying, you win so much from it. It's not just the nutrient-dense food you're getting, but it's the movement, getting out and under the sun, touching the soil. That some of the best times I've actually been in the zone or been in that altered state of consciousness and meditation has been in the garden, where you're so focused in what you're doing, and it's just so beautiful and it's a great way to be grateful too.
Yeah.
It's a great way because you're out there and you see it, and I'm grateful for this seed that I'm going to plant here. I mean, you can. So there's so many things you can do in the garden that only can build you up, not only internally but externally. It's a win-win situation, and I love this stuff. And that was the fourth pillar in the 4 pillars of health. But now that I'm really focusing on this in my next book, I've learned that it is impressive what the dirt can actually do for us. I mean, it is the natural anti-inflammatory that we've all been waiting for. So anyone out there that's got find a place, take your shoes and socks off, and just walk in the dirt, but
yes.
walk bare feet.
Yes.
I mean, it is so important just to get back in touch with the soil. We have our shoes on all day long. We're walking on floors all day long. Get back in touch with the soil. You will see a huge change in who you are just by walking on the dirt again 30 minutes a day. When hopefully this book comes out soon, you're going to see that the benefits are incredible just to come back to Mother Nature. And actually, it's from anti-inflammation to just getting outside and relieving a little bit of stress through physical motion. The benefits are incredible. And you were saying, well, where should we start? Well, if all you got is start with herbs. That's the easiest and the fastest way to start. Start with herbs, because that's where a lot of the nutrition, you'll find lots of nutrition in herbs. So start there and then just keep on growing, because once you do it once, it's almost impossible to stop doing it. I'll promise you.
Absolutely. So, well, this has been perfect. I feel like this going through the 4 pillars was fantastic. So let's just wrap up by naming them one more time. And then let's tell everyone how to get in touch with you and see what you're doing.
Cool. Well, so I call them adequate movement, natural internal dialogue, spinal care, and nutrient-dense food grown in fertile soil without chemicals. Perfect. That's what I call the 4 pillars of health. And with spinal care, I also talk about stress, and then with movement, I talk about rest. So those are involved in what are the 4 pillars of health. To get hold of me, the best way is my webpage, pastosbetterthisfarm.com. You can get everything there. So you can find the podcast there. You can find the YouTube series there also. So you can find everything on my webpage at pastosbetterthisfarm.com. The book's called The 4 Pillars of Health. It's been out for a couple of years now, so that's why I'm really into this next book now, which is I plan on calling. You let me know what you think. I still haven't come down. I'm not 100% sure of the title, but I'm planning on calling it Playing in the Dirt. But let me know what you think, and that should be sent to the editor by the end of the year, if everything works out as it should. And yeah, if you want to stay in contact with me, Pastos Better This Farm. Real quick, the best way to get in contact with me is actually Instagram. So Ben Page DC. So you just want to chat. Usually it's either email, pastosbetterthisfarm@gmail.com or Instagram, Ben Page DC. Those are the 2 places where I'm pretty sure I'll check at least once a day.
Fantastic. And I'll have the links to all of that in the description of this podcast, so you can go through there. And also how I found you was I just typed in Wellness Farmer podcast and bam, right there. So many amazing topics on the podcast, by the way. So the one that really jumped out to me was, let's see if I can find the title. It was something like debt elimination, its effects on your overall well-being. It was something to that effect. And I was like, there's so many wonderful topics you explore on the podcast. So I think if you're enjoying this podcast, definitely go check out Ben and see what he's up to. It's fantastic information, and I think it's a really good. It's very connected to the topics we discuss on this podcast. You definitely go much further in depth into all of these aspects of overall well-being. So Ben, thanks so much for joining us, and I hope to talk to you soon.
Oh, it was a pleasure. I loved coming on your show, and I always love talking with you, Michael. It's a great time.
Okay, I hope you enjoyed that interview with Ben Page. As a reminder, if you're interested in joining us for our live online support group in November and December, visit drummerinthegreatmountain.com/group for more details. Join us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, YouTube. Just go to the website and click on the links at the top. You can also get your copy of Drummer in the Great Mountain off the website. If you've been enjoying this podcast and or the book, consider writing us a review. I've just looked at some of the iTunes reviews. Thank you all so much. There's so many incredible reviews on there, and they just seem to be coming consistently, and I'm just really pleased with that. So thank you so much for taking the time to do that. Consider writing a review on iTunes, Amazon, iBooks, or your podcast app. That really helps us out. For those of you new to the podcast, I've created a free 5-day mini course to help you get up to speed on some of the concepts we discuss on the podcast. You can get that by visiting drummerinthegreatmountain.com/mini course. If you haven't already, you can pick up your free copy of my latest ebook, ADHD Time Management. It's available on Kindle, iBooks, and Google Play. Just do a search for ADHD Time Management on any of those and you will find it. And if you have a topic you'd like us to cover on the podcast, please send us an email. We'd love to hear from you. You can send us an email at info@drummerinthegreatmountain.com. So until next time, be well.